could be made available. And it will also compel the development of the margins, fringes, and enlarge the common lands. So the second example is the Jubilee Line of London. It was built at the cost of £3 billion. And guess how much the benefit to the landowners was? £13.5 billion. So the increased land values by itself can pay for the infrastructure. And I think that should be the standard of choosing between a white elephant and an infrastructure and public works that a city community needs. Now, what's the advantage of lending money? Well, this is the current model, lending money into existence. Currently, under the Bank of International Settlements, you can actually lend money without getting deposits from the public as long as you can raise a minimum capital. It's like, okay, if you want to borrow $1 million from me, and as long as I have a capital, all I'll do is open an account for you worth $1 million that you can draw. And as long as I maintain certain financial ratios and standards, I will be allowed to open, and if I have a problem, I can always borrow from the central monetary authorities to finance it. And that explains why 97% or maybe even more of the money circulating all over the world was lent into existence. And there's a saying, if you control the money, you control the economy. I think money has to go back into the hands of the people in order for it to be democratic. So, how would that happen? Spending money into existence, I just described. If are there infrastructures that the government needs, and there's an untaxed increment in that, then the government can spend money into existence to spur development. The other bonus that we're looking at is, what about financial transactions? What if they decide to sell the currency or local currency because they want to stash it abroad? Then we charge them a Robin Hood tax, token tax. For the conversion, we charge them a tax. Now they'll ask, wouldn't that mean, and this tax can be shared between the two governments. So if a government decides not to charge a Robin Hood tax, tough luck. Then the government that charges it can have it all for themselves and stick out his tongue at the other government for not wanting to pay both. So what you got is a pretty good George's economy that flows like the fountain that I described. Now, here's just another perspective that we could offer. Rather than just give a whole amount of money for the citizen to decide what to do, how to spend it. Instead, what the government could instead guarantee the very basics. Let's say, this is just a broad example, change the amount. If instead of giving 30,000 new Taiwanese dollars, guarantee shelter, which may cost this much each person, utilities, transport, self-improvement such as education, leisure, continuing culture, and even health insurance, which can be treated more as premium. And that would diminish the need to raise a cash amount to give each person a dignified human existence. They can even use this money to engage in a business. Because what struck me before was I met a genetic engineer in Sydney driving a taxi cab. And I asked him, why are you driving a taxi cab? Well, it's because I can't find a job as a genetic engineer, but I'm happy driving a taxi cab because it provides for the basics. So I asked, what if your basics are provided? Would you drive a taxi cab to earn extra money? Or would you volunteer your services as a genetic engineer? And he said, I'd volunteer my services as a genetic engineer. And that's what some people describe as marginal cost pricing wages. Because the problem of subsistence is neither a problem of the worker nor of the employer. Suddenly there's an equality in relationship between the employer and employee, because if the employer will maltreat the employee, he can just quit. If the employee likes the job, he can even volunteer. Why do I believe that Taiwan is ready? First, it's got a tradition already, a philosophical and political orientation, Dr. Su would say, of democracy, republicanism. It has a level of income and development that matches first world standards. It has a desire to regain global competitiveness. And as mentioned in so many talks, the urgency brought about by change in demographics. And it has the courage to consider and explore the idea. Okay, so, sorry. Okay, get back over. Okay, anyway. Yeah, I have a mathematical model, but I don't want to show it to you because it might be too much information. It might be useful in case you have technical questions as to how do you think that's possible, because it looks like such a high period. Thank you.
Does anyone here have questions? Okay, then move on to the slide. Okay. The first question is, what's the difference between taking corporations, rents, profit, and taxation?
Economic rents, as we described this, are unearned income. It's income that really doesn't belong to you. It's pretty much like the beer example that I gave earlier. Nobody created the metallic or fossil fuel ores on Earth. It was nature. If it's for free, but then the extraction was done by a company, the company has no right to claim those ores as theirs. Therefore, they should return the value of the ores based on the attractiveness of the location of the oil wells and the mines. Now, we've got to break that monopoly by saying, okay, so what's it worth to you? Okay, it's pretty much like the Sun-Yat-sen formula. It's worth this much. So if you can find another company that can offer to pay higher royalties, then give it to them. Let it be subject to competition. I'm also not, if it's an unnatural monopoly, I would say destroy it and allow more competition to come in. Because when you tax unnatural monopolies, like let's say taxi cabs, they'll simply pass on the cost to the consumer. But when you open it up to competition, there's no one to pass it on to. So those would be the very basic differences between corporations' rents and profits. Profits would be revenue minus cost. Economic rents would be like when you look at the balance sheet of a company, when land values appreciate, it doesn't increase the debt. It increases the value of the shares. Now that doesn't belong to the company. The increase in the value of land is economic rents that belong to society, and that can be recovered.
The second question is, would land taxes disincentive private land development projects because of the higher taxes associated with the value added?
Good question. Imagine a piece of land being made available, and there were three bidders. One would want to build a factory where it would produce goods and services and hire. The second would be a housing developer who will build, honestly, units that people want to live in. And the other would be a very clever real estate developer who doesn't employ that many people but has advanced information on infrastructure projects, who will buy it and sit on it. Who usually gets it? The third, right? Especially if they have the backing of the banks. But if they were forced to pay for the tax as if it were either a housing developer or a factory, they wouldn't dare bid for it because it's going to be a drain on their liquidity. What if it doesn't develop as much as they thought it would? So that would be my response to that question.
And the third one is how to solve the problem with underground economic, non-paper.
Don't tax it. Simple as that. Look, when you don't tax the underground economy, when you don't, suddenly it won't even make a difference if you are underground or above ground, right? Maybe it will even encourage people to go above ground because they'll now be getting more protection and public services because, hey, we're here. We pay our land value taxes. They care of us now. So that would be my response to that.
And the last one is to some land or building owner who are just living in only from those one small building or even a room or a small patch. Is it correct to levy some tax policy?
Okay. It's pretty much like going back to the UBI, right? If they're already poor and they're only living on that property, it would be cruel to say, get out. That's part of the UBI. If you're only living on, if that's all that you need, why should you be removed just because you can't pay the tax? That is part of recirculating the economic rents. You don't have to do that. But there's another aspect of it. What if there's an old widow or an orphan that inherits a huge estate? What do you do? Drive him out? No. Or what about even religious institutions? They own this vast land. Will you drive them out? No, not necessarily. Land value taxation may not be monetary even. It could be, okay, you've got that much land, it's idle. Will you allow the community to use it as a park? Will you allow the mansion to become a library, and we will even pay you your universal basic income based on the rent to you, any inconvenience meant for that you experience. So that's the way. I would say it's really keeping in mind, the end in mind, social justice, equality of rights, universal human dignity. When you have those visions in mind, especially the Datong of Confucius, which was promoted by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, that should be the general direction, not in terms of just simply giving the income. The end in mind is